All right. So GV, thank you for being here today. And as we get ready to move into our podcast, what I'd like to do is just start by moving through a little grounding invocation. So just to
Sure.
allow us to arrive. So I invite you to close your eyes if you'd like to do that. Have your feet nice and stabilized on the floor. Just feel into your breathing. And as you do, find ourselves in this space, feeling so grateful for this blessed day. We're grateful to be alive and seeking the truth that reveals itself in the eyes of this beautiful beholder today, who has come together to express love and service and compassion in action. We do feel everyone has something special to share in the world, and we're so grateful for Govind Dass to be with us here today to share his story and the sparks that inspired his actions in creating ripple effects, actualizing love in this world. May we be inspired by his story and light in us a lantern for a cause that matters deeply to us and to our world. So today we'll value progress over perfection, and we know that we are guided and protected on this journey of service and love with our human family. And for the sake of our precious short lives, may we be leaders who care. May we be leaders who act mindfully for the greater good of generations to come. And may we listen intently without the need to fill space with sound and seek to understand rather than postulate how to interject. So to our masters and teachers and our guides and guardians, please guide us to learn the lessons of living from our hearts and allowing these ripple effects of goodness, inspiration, hope, and courage to flow from our words into positive actions that support our families, communities, and this beautiful world we've been gifted to occupy. So thank you, Govind Dass, GV, for being here today.
Wow, that was beautiful. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Sure. And would you like to initiate with anything for you, for your own sense of grounding and arriving?
For me, it's always a recognition of Saraswati, bringing in Om Am Saraswataye Namaha. It's always an invocation of her through the way that I speak and the way that I connect with my guides and angels and all of the people that support me, and to bring knowledge and wisdom and also a sense of play and music as a part of everything that I do as well. So I call her in today.
Om Haim Saraswati Namaha. Beautiful. Okay, so here we are, ready to kick off our podcast, Real Eyes, Realize, with Govind Dass or Gv Freeman. And so I'd like to give just a little bio about GV, and then we'll move into our podcast interview. And so first of all, just wanted to, again, thank you for being here. So excited for our listeners to get to know you more. Govind Dass Freeman, GV for short, is a personal growth strategist and a psychospiritual counselor, and has been for over 25 years. And he is living at the center of marketing, product sales, and the self-care Venn diagram. GV is the creator of Founders Thriving, which is a movement designed for founders, entrepreneurs, and executives to be successful and happy. And we'll be talking about that combo today. We also are looking at that to have an opportunity to decouple net worth and self-worth and develop a healthy relationship with themselves and their businesses. GV's interests and experiences have spanned many roles, including serial entrepreneur, fractional CRO, ethnogen guide, and a spiritual tourist. GV pulls from all of these disciplines to help startups launch, companies grow, and founders thrive. So I know GV is also a dedicated yogi who has taken a look at accepting this name of Govind Dass from beautiful teacher Ram Dass, and really serving as an ever-present reminder that while we can never go back, we can always look to make a brand new start, and starting now to change our ending. And I love that. And so as we take a look at you and everything that you do in this world, I know some of that includes hosting retreats and really also enjoying music, having been a DJ in your past life, so to speak. And so spending time with friends and your spiritual family. And so thank you for being part of our family here today.
Yeah, thank you. It's a
Yeah.
pleasure to be here and a great honor to be asked to join you and all of the people that are realizing that we can do some good in the world.
Mhm. And I know we've come to grow and know one another through a kindred spirit, philosophy
Mm.
teacher, Advaita philosophy, and looking at self-realization. And so I love that, you keyed in on that, because really that's what we're looking at, is how do we take a look at who we are and who we choose to be in the world, and how do we continue to realize that we're already there, but we can hone things and take a look at how we can give back as well. So
Yeah, it is a constant struggle to remember that we're already there.
yeah.
We have everything we already need. Um, and it's a daily practice to realize that I have it all, and I'm going to forget, and I'm going to remember, and I'm going to forget. And one of my teachers says the best part of forgetting is that we can remember. So
Mhm.
um, spending time with people like you, spending time with Soul Family and the Sangha, is always an opportunity to remember.
Yeah, yeah. And that is part of the journey, right? Remembering and coming back. So
I'm
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, if left to my own devices, I frequently say I must be pretty important because I'm all I think about. So it's very helpful for me to spend time with other people to realize that, yeah, I'm not that important after all.
Exactly. When we think about, right, the cosmos, and how I love some of the realizations that, like, here we think we are so big and our problems are so big, when we realize we're like this little speck on this spinning earth in this amazing galaxy. And yet at the same time, we can continue to, like you said, lean into one another. So
Mm.
as we begin, I really am curious if you can paint this picture, a bit of your journey. You've done quite a few different things and you've had impact in many different ways. How can you share your story with us about some of the, key teachings or landing points for you?
Yeah, happy to. And I would say today I am an expert generalist. Um, I love learning a little bit about a lot of things. And I think that's the way that when you read my bio, it says marketing, sales, product, and self-care Venn diagram. And I think self-care has been the most recent addition to that. But I've
Mhm,
spent the better part of 25 years really in the corporate world.
mhm,
And now the last 15 years of self-care, merging those two things together. What got me here is a completely unconnected set of events that should probably have never happened were it not for the universe. I grew up in a tiny little town, Sargent, Nebraska, 700 people.
mm,
Um, and I was just another little country kid
mhm,
riding his bike to school every day. Um, my parents moved to a little bit larger town when I was a seventh grader. And I would say the first big inflection point. So I have like four really big inflection points that I would say dramatically altered the course of who I am today.
sure.
And the first one was my sophomore year in high school. I got outed as a gay kid,
Mm,
um, sort of against my will. And my whole sophomore year was really challenging. And
mm,
I, about halfway through that year, I said, I need to get out of here. And I was literally walking out of the choir room one day and I saw on a bulletin board
mm.
to become a foreign exchange student with the Rotary. So, as somewhat of a precarious 14-year-old,
Yes.
I went home and I said, hey, I want to do this. And people said, what? um,
Not at the
and
time of tell me more, right? It was more
yeah,
like,
and
what the heck are you thinking?
at that time, I was the youngest. I was the youngest exchange student that had left from Nebraska. So
Mhm,
as a 15-year-old, I picked up and I moved to Belgium for 11 months,
mm,
and I didn't know the language. All I was doing at the time was just escaping the trauma that I was left with. And in a lot of ways, it was amazing. I got an opportunity to go experience all of these different people and cultures. There were 90 some, there were 250 exchange students living in Belgium at the time from almost 90 countries. So being able to experience that and to travel a lot of Europe was fantastic. I would also say that it was a perfect opportunity to begin developing some pretty unhealthy relationships with substances. So we do our best to escape that kind of trauma. And when we don't want to feel that, when we don't have a really healthy outlet to experience what that trauma is like, then we start shutting it down, we numb.
Yeah. So
I would say that's where a lot of the numbing, that's where the initial numbing and the initial escapism came from. I proceeded then to come back. I finished high school. I went to college. I was a DJ in college and even a little bit before college. And then after about 3 years in college, I got bored there and I went to work for Carnival Cruise Lines on the cruise ships for a while. And that again reinforced not only my free spirit, but also some really abusive patterns with substances. And I did that for a couple of years. And then the next big inflection point was when I got off the cruise ships. And I like to say that the Custer County, the judge in Custer County didn't think that I should drink anymore. So looking back and saying, I never thought that I was going to be that person to spend a night in jail. Like that was just, it was a deeply held belief. Like, what, who, me? No, that's not something that would happen to me. And it was, and I look back now and it was a huge, like it was a huge shock to the ego.
Yeah.
And it woke me up in a way that not only that, but also financially, that was that experience cost me $10,000 between all of the attorney fees and all of the probation and all of these things. And I was like, wow, this is not fun.
To spend that kind of money on just getting out of trouble, huh? Not exactly the good kind of trouble that we're looking at.
No, not at all. And I, so they also told me that I had to join a 12-step recovery program. So I started going and I would like do the minimum amount, like one meeting a week. And then I was in this meeting and I would hear this older woman talk and she just made sense. Her name is Connie. And I walked up to her after a meeting one day and I said, hey, would you be my sponsor? And she kind of cocked her head and looked at me funny. And she was like, well, I don't usually sponsor men in this program. And I said, well, does it matter that you're old and I'm gay? And she kind of looked at me and she said, well, I think that it does. So that was the first probably healthy relationship that I ever had. And that started in many ways. I look back now and say, thank God I'm an alcoholic, because that started this path of self-realization. That was in 2007. I'll fast forward really quickly. Like 2015, I'd gotten sober. I'd been really happy with my life. My life continued to grow. My finances got a lot better. I moved to St. Louis after a couple of years of sobriety, and I started therapy, which was a turning point. It was an opportunity to start doing some work. But then in 2015, I found myself in Peru, sitting with shamans in the jungle, drinking ayahuasca, because there was just something that I couldn't quite get to. There was something that I wasn't seeing. Ayahuasca changed my life. That was another major turning point. And it opened me up to the healing powers of sacred medicine, and some deep honoring and reverence to Mother Earth and to intuition and knowledge that we don't really understand yet. So that was 2015. Then in the middle of the pandemic, August of 2020, I would say the next big shift happened, and I sat for 10 days in Vipassana.
And
Um,
Vipassana is the silent meditation retreat.
yeah,
Right?
so 10 days, honestly, 11 days of silent meditation. You're sitting for 12 to 14 hours a day in meditation. You eat a couple of meals a day and some tea in the afternoon. You get an hour, like you crave this hour in the evening where the teacher is actually talking. Because the rest of the time you are left with your own mind. And
Yeah.
My mind by itself is not a place to go to by myself.
We talk about a dark neighborhood sometimes, right?
Yeah, there are definitely parts of that, and something that happened there that I was not expecting, and I didn't even realize it until a couple of months later that what had been taken away from me as a part of that meditation process was the thought that I was broken. And it's really challenging to explain how that all works and how it all happens, because nobody ever really told me that I was broken.
Yeah.
It's just sort of a feeling that I had grown up with. It was sort of this shell, this clear plastic shell that had been around me since I was probably a little kid. And it's like if you imagine a person that grows up sitting in a dark cave their entire life, and they've never left that cave.
Yeah.
They don't know what the light is.
Yeah.
Like somebody could come into the cave and explain to them what light is, but they would be like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, it's pretty dark in here.
That's right. It hasn't been experiential to any degree.
So for me, Vipassana was an experience of being unbroken. I had lots of people told me that I was just fine, but I never believed them, never really experienced the concept of being unbroken. So that was a major shift. And then I would say the last one, most recently, the one that you and I got to experience in Nicaragua, was this Founders Thriving, this program that I put together for entrepreneurs and founders and executives to do some inside work. And taking 9 people to Nicaragua was really the first time in my life that I said, I am now living my Dharma. I am now living why I was put on this planet.
Yeah, you felt like it was the integration of so many of the aspects of who you are and what you are bringing to others in your community. It's amazing.
So yeah,
I love that.
That's how we got here.
It's, and you look at the path, right? And like you said, we're not always choosing when these different sliding door moments happen, if you will. But it sounds to me like you continued to have some inquiry when you were in these moments, and all right, here's where we're going now, down this path. Now, you mentioned at the beginning this self-care being a very big part of your focus now for when you're working with entrepreneurs, founders, executives, but then also yourself. What have you learned along the way, aside from kind of looking at a belief like I'm broken and trying to dismantle that and look at a different way of being? But what do you notice about working with people that seems to be the hold-up point when it comes to self-care?
The primary holdup around self-care is I don't have time, or I don't know how. So I hear a lot of, well, I don't know how to meditate, so I can't do it, or it's hard, so I can't do it. So I think that those two things, I don't know how and I don't have time, are the two primary pushbacks. My answer to that, and what I have really been kind of preaching from the rooftops since about 2017, when I wrote a book in 2017 called the SaaS Field Manual. And one of the things in that book was to integrate self-care into the creation of your startup, because if you don't do it in the beginning, it sort of like rolls over top of you. And I use the 80-20 rule. So for every 8 hours of work that you are working on your company or your startup, you need to find 2 hours of self-care. And the door of self-care is super wide. So that might be meditation. That might be eating, like turning your phone off and eating a healthy meal with your family. That
Right.
could be going to the gym. It could be going for a walk in nature.
Yeah.
Self-care it's so broad, but I think it has to be intentional. I have to say, I'm going to take this time. I'm going to take this 30 minutes, even if it's 30 minutes at your desk, minimizing all of your windows
Mm.
and sitting there eating a meal and thinking about the food that you're putting in your body. That's 30 minutes of self-care.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not really that hard to do. It's much more about the intentionality of a
Yeah.
couple hours a day.
Yeah. And knowing that I work with many, different executives as well. And the question I'm always hearing is, well, what's the return, right? What's the return on that? So what have you found in your own experience with, an investment of when you talk about Vipassana and having gone through this 10 to 12-day experience? It had some foundational shifts for you going on. So what do you see as the ROI for some of the self-care practices with the people that you work with as well as yourself?
I'm going to steal a line from 12-step recovery that I never agreed with.
Okay.
There would be people in recovery that would say, my worst day sober was better than all of the best days that I had when I was drinking.
Mhm.
And I think that's total bullshit, because I had some amazing times partying and drinking on the cruise ships and all over the place, all over the world. I had some pretty amazing times. But I can say today that my worst day post Vipassana
Mm.
is still better than my best day pre Vipassana.
Mhm.
Now, for me, that was because I let go of this thought that I was broken.
Yeah.
So maybe people don't feel like they're broken, and that's great. But I
Right.
can tell you that the ROI for me is my happiness set point is higher today than has ever been
Mm.
in the history of my life. Do I have hard days? Yeah. Do I have days that are no fun? Do I have days that I got to work, 16, 18 hours a day to launch some project? Yeah. But generally speaking, I am so much more content and happy and fulfilled today than I ever was
Mm.
before I started doing this work.
Mhm.
And if you're not willing to take the time, or if you don't value your own happiness and self-worth enough
Mhm.
to take the time and really say, man, what's going to make me happy?
Mhm.
Then you're not ready to be on the path yet. If you are really just interested in making a shit ton of money and hoping and crossing your fingers that that's going to make you happy in the future, then call me when you've realized that that's not the case.
The chase, right? The chase for the temporary that continues to be that ball that keeps changing in front of us. Um, when you look at many of the clients that you work with, and when you describe the path, I've also heard you talk about it as, you've got to go and be willing to do the work. What does that mean to you? Oftentimes I know people are just kind of trying to just get by, right? Get by, work with their families, work with their jobs, trying to just kind of maintain some sense of stability. What do you think is an opportunity for them that is above and beyond just getting by?
Wow, that's a great question. And I think it's a hard question for people to answer, because again, the door to self-awareness, the door to the happiness, purpose, and fulfillment is
Mhm.
so wide, and there are so many options.
Mhm.
And as adults, I think our willingness to try new things and to be feel embarrassed or feel like we're not a part of gets lower and lower.
Yeah, the tolerance.
So when my first yoga teacher, we would sit in a class and everybody'd be sitting there, and somebody might come into the yoga room late, and we would all turn around and he would say, "Oh, we've been waiting for you." like, um, and I think that that's the way that some of this stuff feels.
Yeah.
It feels a little culty. It feels like I don't know what I'm doing, so I don't want to do it. And I think that there's a lot of really simple entry points. And for me, honestly, an entry point was yoga. I bought a Groupon for yoga in 2012. And in 2013, I was doing yoga teacher training. Like I'd never been to a yoga class in my life. So I just happened to show up at the right time.
Right.
So having, I go back to intentionality. So picking an activity that has an intention behind it. So an intention of self-awareness, whether that's yoga, and maybe that's going to a different yoga class. So if you're taking yoga at the gym, maybe trying to take a yoga class at like some weird woo-woo yoga studio and seeing what they have to say and seeing what that feels like. That's a really easy entry point. Even starting to do meditation on an app, and a guided meditation, picking up a book from Brene Brown, picking up a book from Tara Brach, starting to learn a little bit about yourself. The way that I explain this to people is that we have 4 bodies. We have the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. Most people, when they're starting this journey, they start in the physical body. They eat better, they go to the gym. And then one day they're running on the treadmill, and instead of listening to a playlist on the music on the treadmill, somebody says, "Oh, you should really listen to this Brene Brown podcast, or like listen to this book about happiness." So then they start listening to this book, and they're like, "Okay, I'll try some of these things. I'll try cutting sugar out of my diet."
Yeah.
And then they start having feelings. So now they've moved from their physical body into their mental body with the book. And now they're starting to have some feelings in the emotional body, and they don't know what to do with those feelings. So then they look for a coach, they look for a therapist. They want to have somebody help provide some context for what they're feeling, what their lived experience is. And once then they move out of that emotional body, and we're in all of these bodies all the time.
At the same time.
But as you begin to progress, you're like, wow, this is kind of interesting learning about myself. And when I do this one thing, I actually feel better. That's my version. That's my definition of spirituality, is simply self-awareness. It's taking our intuition and our inquisitiveness and turning it inward. And that's where happiness lies. The real happiness lies from within. And all I have to do is start learning about myself a little bit. And then I stop stitching together these temporary moments of happiness that are like, oh, I'm going to go hang out with friends tonight. I'm going to go drink some beer. I'm going to go buy a house. I'm going to go buy a car. I'm going to do these. All of these external things are just little moments of false happiness, perceived happiness that I stitch together close enough to where I don't feel unhappy anymore. And when I can stop stitching those things together, you can enter the path anywhere. You just have to have a desire to do it.
Yeah. That desire is, I think, that key entry point. It's the saying of, yes, I see that I'm ready. And do you find that there's an element of trust that also is involved? You know, the notion that when the student is ready, the teacher arrives. Like, what does that mean for you? Like, when you were showing up and trying some new things, did you find that kind of the right people plopped into your path at the right times?
Yes, but I think there's a caveat around that as well, because the right people might not always feel wonderful. I learned some amazing things from some teachers who it did not feel good.
Yeah.
My first yoga teacher, who I learned a lot of beautiful physical asana work.
Yeah.
When I kept asking him to help me with other things farther down the path, meditation and spirituality, I found myself in a really precarious situation with him. And he was doing something that he wasn't qualified for. And it really put me in a challenging spot. And it was a really, I remember sitting on my mat in his house. We were working together 4 days a week privately. And I remember him saying something to me sitting on my mat one morning that just shook me to the core. I sat there and cried on my mat for 30 to 45 minutes. And I said to myself, if I get up and leave right now, I will never come back. And I just sat there and
In the
felt my
discomfort.
feelings for one of the first times. It was probably one of the first emotional breakdowns slash breakthroughs that
Yes.
I had had on the journey. So he was the teacher that I needed at that moment to give me the breakdown that I needed to go to somebody else and ask, who should I go to next? And that person sent me to the person that I ended up doing my yoga teacher training with.
Yeah.
So, Einstein says coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous.
Mm.
And I think that we're always getting what we need. We just got to slow down enough to recognize what it
To
is we're getting.
recognize. Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think and when I hear you talk, you went through, your sophomore year, you see this flyer about going to go be this exchange student. There is, even though your motivation at the time may have indirectly been escape, I need to get out, I'm experiencing this huge trauma. The kinds of, it's almost like there was no accident in that happening, right? That was an experience for you, probably a worldly view that came across that was something none other than what you had experienced in the past. And that having to grow up very, very quickly. So when you find yourself in this mode of partnering with individuals, doing their own deep work, knowing that it's a big, wide open door, like you talked about, how is it that you find yourself like being there with them? How would you describe yourself either as a coach or as a partner when you are really looking at investigating the discovery of going into especially the deeper emotional, spiritual space?
While I'm not perfect at any of this, I would say that the way that I try and show up is simply as a mirror.
Yeah.
Most of us don't have an opportunity to understand and see who we truly are, both the good and the bad. Very frequently, people, if we're doing good work out in the world, most of the time, people will tell us, oh, that's such beautiful work. Oh, way to go. Congratulations. We've been operating under the validation model since we were in elementary school, which is what got us to this point. Is we've been seeking external validation for a long time.
Yeah.
But very few people show us how to find validation from the inside out. But something else that happens is that nobody really shows us our shadow work. Nobody really shows up in a non-judgmental way, because like if you're in a partnership and you're kind of being a dick and your spouse is like, hey, you're being a dick, and there's usually some judgment around that. There's like, I don't like you right now. You sleep on the couch because you're acting in a way that I don't approve of. So we do get to see ourselves, but it always comes with a cost. It always comes with some hurt feelings.
Yeah.
And what I try and do is show up and ask people questions that allow them to see themselves in a new way, but to also sit in a place of complete non-judgment. I do my best to simply love my clients the best way that I know how. And even if something comes up that's really not very friendly to them or kind of yucky for them, I have spent enough time working through my own yuck that I'm perfectly capable of saying like, well, that's all you got? Like, that's not really as bad as you think. But thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
So finding somebody in your life that is a non-judgmental mirror and can ask some really interesting and thought-provoking questions is really all you need.
I love that. I think that part about the insightful and thoughtful, thought-provoking questions is really a key part. Because when we talked about self-realization at the beginning of this talk, all of that is an inquiry process. And when you look at having a guide, they're not going to do the work for you, but they facilitate maybe pointing you in a direction.
Yeah.
And hopefully this is something that they've had some skill in going down a path, and they can let us know if we need to do some course corrections along the way.
And I think that So a lot of the entheogen work, the psychedelic guiding that I do today is very much in that vein. So we have our mutual teacher used to say, one of them would say, I'm just the shaky finger that points at the moon.
Mhm.
And I'm not the moon. I'm just the finger that points at the moon, that shows you where to look. And I think that that is, for me, what has been the most beneficial aspect of the kind of process and protocol that I have used to guide when I do it individually, is when I get to know the client, when we're going through their history, we're able to see sort of where the snags are. And that's sometimes a place, an awareness of intelligence or experience, maybe not intelligence, experience. Like, I've seen this before, or I've heard something like this before. Let's come back to that.
Yeah.
Or sometimes it's very much just an energetic intuition. Like I can feel someone's kind of energy tighten up,
Yeah.
voice changes, posture changes. And then I also recognize, like, there's another place that we can look. Like there's another corner, another dark corner that we can look in.
Yeah.
And as I'm working with somebody, whether it's with medicine or not, I very frequently ask, hey, do you want to do some work right now?
Yeah.
And if so, are you willing to look in this dark corner?
Mhm.
And it's simply that's the question that draws someone's attention to say, yeah, I'm ready to look at the moon now. I know that your finger is not the moon, but I'm ready to look in that direction.
Mhm.
And most of the time, that's all you have to do. And then you simply hold space while people do their work, because
Mhm.
we are innately qualified to heal ourselves.
Mhm.
We just have to
Absolutely.
move slow enough and gentle enough to allow our bodies to acclimate to what that healing feels like.
Yeah. And that sounds to me why so much of your own realization on self-care has come in is just to kind of slow it down, to be able to
Yeah.
see the signals and be able to kind of process what's the signal to noise here with
Yep.
what's going on. I'd love to, if you're open to talking about, so you had kind of your early life and experiences that was around using substances for numbing and
Mhm.
then moving into plant medicine. And I heard you talk about the intentionality and the sacredness. And so I'd love to know like the shift for you and how much reverence you do have for how you work with medicine and how that becomes really a sacred ceremony when you're working with people.
Yeah. So I would go back and say that there was a transition. I spent 7 years in recovery, as a sober person, before going back to plant medicine, to go
Mhm.
back to sacred medicine as a recovery tool. I was really using it for recovery.
Mhm.
And that was almost 7 years ago. And I would say that it took a good 5 years to really unwind
Mhm.
some of the thoughts and expectations around 12-step work
Mhm.
as it related to medicine work, because I
Mhm.
was now using things, I was using substances that in the past I was abusing
Mhm.
in some ways.
Mhm.
So I do think that intention is the first step for me. I sort of have a 6-step process that I work with people, and the first step is intention.
Mhm.
Knowing what the intention is and knowing why you're going to be sitting with a specific substance is the most important part, and it also uh, changes the preparation.
Mhm.
So if I know that I'm going to be doing this deep work with a substance, then that will change my preparation, how I choose to show up, what work I choose to do ahead of time. Um, so I think that those two things are the biggest determining factors,
Mhm.
because I will say there is also a perfectly acceptable place for anybody who chooses to and can do so responsibly to say, I want to experience some level of ecstatic bliss and joy. And if you choose to set an intention to experience that, and your preparation is making sure that you have the right substance in the right dosage and the right environment. And that environment might be a big music festival where you can go and dance and be joyful and sing. I think that is a perfectly acceptable use of some of these substances. It is not, I wouldn't call that sacred in this case. There are probably opportunities to do ecstatic dance in a sacred way.
Yeah.
But if that's what your intention is, then just set the proper planning ahead of time.
Yeah.
And if you need to do deep work in trauma, then that's a very different intention. That's a very different preparation. It's probably a very different use of the substance, and it changes the setting and dosage significantly. So, and also I think the last step for me is always integration.
Yeah.
Making sure that you integrate that experience however you can.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You just mentioned something that I think is so key is having not only set intention, mindset, but also setting, because that certainly will help to give a backdrop for the experience. I'd love to know a little bit more. So you had your inaugural Founders Thriving Consciousness Experience, selected location in Nicaragua. That's a whole very specific setting for the series of events that you designed. So tell me a little bit more about what your thoughts are now looking back on that in terms of did that exceed your expectations and thoughts? How did that setting really facilitate the process?
When I came back, so many people asked me, like, how did it go? And I mean, it was 6 days of some of the deepest work that not only I had done, but that the participants had shown up to do. So I can narrow it down to 2 phrases. It exceeded the expectations of the participants and myself. And it was probably the most important work that I've ever done in my life. The setting where we were at, Costa Dulce in Nicaragua, was so supportive of everything that we were there to do. I created that experience, that specific consciousness experience, as a 5-day medicine ceremony. It was a step-by-step process. And the medicine in the beginning was just yoga, and it was meditation and breath work. And then it got a little bit deeper into a microdose. And then it got a little bit deeper into holotropic breath work. And then it got even more deep into a full journey with psilocybin. And then the last day was integration. And as you know, we've continued to integrate. The group has continued to integrate now 3 months later. I think that the setting there and the mindset was so important. We oriented everybody in the direction of decoupling net worth and self-worth.
Yeah.
Building a healthier relationship with yourself and your business. That was the intention. And then we gave people an opportunity to participate in a lot of different experiences to reach that goal. And people had such a vast and a variety of different experiences. They had the experience that they needed. This wasn't a prescribed thing where you show up at a conference and you watch 7 or 8 PowerPoint presentations and you take data home. It was an experience. It wasn't called a retreat or a conference or a workshop for a reason. I very much built it to be experiential, because when the body remembers, the mind doesn't have to.
And I think that those were some of the I'd say glowing testimonials that came back. Is, I would even say to a certain extent, individuals were like, I didn't even know what to expect. Like there was something inside that said, this is something that I feel called to do right here and right now. And so now when you look at building upon that, so you're looking at continuing to do these kinds of consciousness experiences, right, in the next year. And say a little bit more about what you kind of have in your midst of having your Dharma come through in this world.
For 25 years, I've been working. I gave myself the title growth strategist. And for 25 years now, that's what I've been doing for companies.
Mhm.
I have been helping them grow strategically, mostly tech companies. And January 1st of 2021, I had a psychic reading. And
Mhm.
I'd never had a psychic reading in my life. Out of all of the woo-woo shit that I've done and all of the people that I've hung out with, I've had astrology readings, but never a straight up psychic reading.
Oh,
And that day, it was like the universe was speaking to me, and I was finally ready to listen.
yeah.
2 days later, the words "Founders Thriving" came out of my mouth, and I always know that there's something right happening when I go to GoDaddy and the domain name still exists. So when I found foundersthriving.com and I realized that nobody thought of that before, I
Yep.
said, okay,
Jump on that.
there's something here. And the next couple of months, I began to realize that my dharma was to work with humans and not as much with companies.
Mhm.
And the reason for this is that if we can look at a founder, an entrepreneur, an executive that is operating at some of the higher levels of an organization, even smaller organizations,
Sure.
10, 20 people, if we can create a space for those people to begin experiencing some expanded consciousness and some mindfulness and some self-care,
Mhm.
then they will go back to their companies and their culture will change
Mhm.
based on their willingness to bring in more self-care into the workplace.
Mhm.
So that's really my goal, is to continue providing experiences, not just for individual founders, but we're also working on an experience this year for co-founders to come and do deep work to move from co-founders to partners. And I
Mhm.
think that there's a foundation really of trust. I think if you would think of the intention of that experience, what we're building is rather than expanded consciousness, it's a deeper level of trust.
Yeah.
Also considering taking a small group of founders to Peru for what we're calling the transformation experience, which is going
Mhm.
to be ayahuasca and potentially Huachuma or San Pedro.
Mhm.
Deep work. And then we're still exploring some stuff that is going to be stateside.
Mhm.
It's going to be a little not quite as deep. We call it an intentional vacation. Like if you want to go hang out with other founders or entrepreneurs and do like 2 or 3 hours of work every day, kind of
Yeah.
as a reset, is a simple reset that you can fly to in a day. You don't have to have a passport. There is no sacred medicine used in the experiences that we're looking at in the United States. That's where I think that's what 2022
Yes.
holds. And also, I'm hoping to be able to share this experience and these insights with more people. So
Yeah.
whether that's conferences or podcasts or whatever,
Yes.
doing small group work anywhere we can.
That's wonderful. It's wonderful. And I see you as such a brilliant um, individual who has just kind of come into this space of listening to these different callings that you have been, invited to become a part of. And now it seems to me like you're kind of cultivating this deeper sense of mastery by the way that you show up and the intentionality that you have around that. And so it's a wonderful thing to witness,
Thank you.
that wholesomeness. Yes, absolutely. One thing I wanted to ask too, really quick here, is when you do work with individuals, I know you've mentioned talking about doing deep work, and I'm wondering if that is like, what does that mean, right? For some people, that can be like, God, that sounds super scary and like a whole lot of extra time that I don't have any of. And so why do I need to do that at this point in my life? Right.
Mhm.
So I'm curious a little bit about the what, and then also why is it necessary?
So deep work is, I think that there's a lot of people who say, I'm doing some deep work or I'm doing some inside work
Yeah.
and I've provided deep work for me as an acronym. So deep is discovery.
Mm-hmm.
So really learning who I am and going through and doing some self-awareness Q&A, not only with me as an individual, as a coach, but also answering questions for yourself.
Mhm.
So discovery is the first D. The second one is excavation. So letting go of what no longer serves us. When we begin doing some discovery and some inventory of who we really are, we might find some things that we don't love about ourselves, or we might find some things that no longer serve us.
Yeah.
This thought that I am consistently thinking about this topic might not serve me to grow my business, or might not serve me to be a better partner to my family.
Is that where you would go into the deep beliefs? Like, for example, what you found in your Vipassana retreat, that realization of, oh, like I have a thought that is on the background of feeling broken. How is that serving me? And how do I start to unlearn that and kind of take a look at a different approach?
Yes. And yes to that. And here's the thing, that thought about, in this case, being broken, that was not a thought that I even knew that I had. I had to have someone reflect that back to me.
Sure.
Because it was the only thing that I had ever known. So the challenge with doing deep work, shadow work, is that, we can't natively see our shadow. We have to have some help. So usually that is in my case, either a substance that helps me see some of that, or another trusted friend or spiritual teacher or a therapist that can help me begin to realize some of that.
Right. Back to that mirror that you were talking about before,
Yeah.
a trusted mirror. Yeah.
So after we have realized like who we are and we have gotten rid of some stuff, the next E in the process is actually experiment. And it's about creating experiential little activities inside of my life. So I have it's called the Founder's Thriving Compass. It has 9 different areas of our life that we can begin to look at. And if I look at one of those areas in my life and I say, you know what, I'd really like to build some more play into my work life. That might be, or into my career. So I look at one aspect, which is career, or I work maybe relationships is another aspect, or social is another aspect. And I say, I want to cultivate play in my career or relationships or social. So we match those two things up and we say, let's create an experiment to see how to incorporate more play into that area of my life. And then we go out and do that. Like for me, that was 2-3 weeks ago, like going and playing ping pong. I said I needed more play in my life. So I found somebody who also wanted to play with me. And we went to the rec center and we played ping pong. I haven't played ping pong in years, but it was a lot of fun.
Awesome.
So that's just one example of cultivating play. It might also be, how do I let go of judgment in my career? So that might be another experiment that we could create another experiment. And then you come back and report, like, how did that go? How did it feel? You do a little, some awareness practices around that experiment. And then as you create enough of these experiments, not that playing ping pong one time is going to increase my fun level exponentially, but it felt good. Now it makes me want to do it again. And it was something that I hadn't done in a while. Maybe that's a pottery class. Maybe that's going painting. Who knows? So we craft these experiments individually, one at a time, for each person on the things that they need to look at. And then we go back and review. And the last P in deep is prosper, which is really like, is my life getting better? We look at these 9 areas, we set some goals. I use the objectives and key results methodology that kind of Google made famous. And we use those to go back and see if my life is improving in the ways that I want it to. And like I said before, when the body remembers, the brain doesn't have to. So if I have a good, positive experience doing something, then I don't have to remember to do it again. My body is remembering for me. So that's what deep work means to me.
I love that. I think it just paints a beautiful picture of what that means. And then given your example as well, if we want to be deliberate about, I want to integrate play into my life more. And when you go and then sample and experiment something, and then you come back and you're reflecting on that, you're allowing the brain to kind of have this new opportunity to say, I can set tone for what the kind of a future I'm really looking at. And then I can go and take care of it right here and now. And so that's incredible. And it's short and sweet too.
And I think so. My hashtag is stop crushing it. All of the kill it and the crush it people that have kind of originated in the mid 2000s and have continued. I push against all of that. So if you're somebody who works 70 hours a week, and your life is not very comfortable, so your family doesn't get to see you very often, you're stressed out, you might be abusing substances, and a substance could be caffeine, or it could be something, it could be
work,
drug,
right?
alcohol related. So or it could be abusive behavior. Like I'm going shopping, I'm gambling, I'm like, who knows how you're numbing out from that 70-hour a week thing. So an experiment might be, what's it feel like for 5 days to work 50 hours a week? And for some people, 50 hours a week might even sound like a lot, but other people, they say, there's no way I can get all of this stuff done in 50 hours a week. And then we have to go back to what the intention is. What are you really here to do? Are you here to burn yourself out? Do you think that making $1 million is going to make you happy? I bought the domain name miserablemillionaire.com. That's the next book that I'm going to write, because I meet more of those people than I meet happy millionaires.
Yeah. So excited about your continuation of not only being this guide for people doing their work, but for your continuation on doing your work with this insightful and a deep listener as you are in terms of the path. And so if people were to want to work with you, where can they find you? We'll certainly do some links to some of these retreats these experiences that we've talked about. But even if it were somebody who wanted to work with you one-on-one, how would that happen?
Yeah, so I would say that if you are a founder, an entrepreneur, an executive, an intrapreneur, because for many years I was an intrapreneur, people would hire me to come in and build new things inside of their companies. And there is a level of ownership thinking that I think qualifies us as usually working too hard. So when we really own what we're doing and we so believe in it, you're a perfect candidate for Founders Thriving. So if you're just interested in joining a community of other people who believe that there is a chance to be successful and happy at the same time, rather than saying, I'm going to be happy once I make $1 million, once I achieve this thing. If you want to do it at the same time, go to foundersthriving.com. We'd love to have you be a part of that community. And also, if you want to come on an experience, we'd love to have you there. If any of this resonates with you and you'd like to do some one-on-one work, some deep work, as I said, and that can be anything we make it. That's usually a weekly session, a weekly coaching session with me. And we create these experiments and we really figure out what makes you tick and what you want to achieve in your life. And because I've spent 25 years in corporate, the beauty that I have, which a lot of therapists, a lot of coaches are not going to be able to talk to you about negotiating with procurement or signing a $1 million annual reoccurring revenue deal, or how to change your inbound marketing strategy. I have the advantage of spending a lot of time in both worlds now, and I'm just mashing those two things up.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you. And what I would love to do is, as we draw this to a close, oftentimes what we do is, or what I do is provide these kind of collective questions. There are questions of inquiry that we ask to all of our guests, and it's more just meant to be spontaneous. And so if you're willing to do that, let's go ahead and go through our closing collective questions. Okay.
Let's go.
All right. So when you think about it, and I don't know if you are reading or watching anything much these days, this has been a very interesting question during COVID, but is there anything that right now is either on your bookshelf or something that you enjoy watching?
Oh my God. I buy 10 times more books than I read.
Ew.
There's You can find this. You can pull this in the show notes. There's a Japanese word that is actually created for people like me who buy more books than they ever read. I can't remember what the word is, but they have a special term for it. So I'm going back through some of Brené's work right now. I would say the one of the primary books or actually it's a talk. You can't get it. It's not a book to buy. It's called The Power of Vulnerability. It is a 6-hour talk that you can get off of Audible. And it is probably the one place that I go when I'm stuck. I will go back to that.
Is that where the redacted Netflix came from? Because there's a 1-hour Netflix type special by the same name.
So I've seen the Netflix special. This is a 6-hour workshop that Brené Brown actually does in front of a group of people.
Okay.
And it's over the course of a couple of days.
Yeah.
So I always recommend that. Every day that I do medicine work, I always listen to a podcast from Ram Dass, Ram Dass Here and Now. He is probably my root teacher and where I got the name Govind Dass. So that's always on my list. A book that I have gone through and I'm going through again is The Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah.
Another one that I consistently go through is The Alchemist. So those are probably the ones at the top of my list.
Lovely. Lovely. Those sound like classics, right? Like classic, like you said, they're on the, you've got, your altar, and then right next to the altar, those like guidebooks that just continue to be our compass. So thank you for that.
Yeah. I was just going to look and see, I'm usually listening to 3 or 4 Audible books. So right now I am in Rising Strong from Brené.
Yeah.
I just finished listening to The Prosperous Coach. Difficult Conversations. I also went through Holotropic Breathwork by Stanislav Grof. So yeah, those are probably and I'm doing one on Taoism.
Yeah.
So those, it just depends on the mood that I'm in when I get into the car. Depends on which book pops up. So
right. I love that. Like you said, the generalist, but I know about you go deep. Like you might have your capacity to go wide, but I also know how much you go deep. So when you think about, you've had a lot of different inspirational individuals in your life. You mentioned, I think, that your first sponsor, and then you mentioned Ram Dass. And then maybe just in general, I'm wondering if there's somebody who, if you could have dinner with them now, whether or not they're past or present, who would it be? Who would you like to engage in dialogue?
Dinner would definitely be Ram Dass.
With Ram Dass.
Yeah. Other teachers, our shared teachers, both Manoj and Jyoti Chalom. Jyoti recently dropped this body and is doing magical work in the ether somewhere. Manoj is definitely still with us, and I'm looking forward to spending more time with them. Jyoti was a pivotal point, 2016, when we met.
Yeah.
Starting to understand Vedanta in a really profound way also changed my life. And I would also say this, I would call my second yoga teacher, Saul David Ray.
Yes.
Is a bhakti teacher. I, to this day, still have trouble with some of the bhakti work. But that experience, that 200 hours that I spent in teacher training with Saul opened my heart in a way that I don't think could have been opened in any other way. So
almost
that
like
was
the
another
gateway to the rest of the work. That's beautiful.
I would say so.
Well, and part of this next question is, what do you do or what do you say to yourself when times get tough? When you find, like you said, you're having that rough day and you're having to kind of come back to remembering that you are full and complete and not broken. What do you do? What is your catalyst for, here's how I want to show up?
So I can, when I'm having a rough day, I do have the ability, and it's been a true gift, to put my shit on a shelf for a short period of time. So when I have to show up and work with a client, that's one of the ways. And I think that comes a lot from 12-step work as well. When I'm focused on your problems, I'm not focused on mine.
Yes.
So in some ways, I can show up for my clients, I can show up for people in my life and be there for them. And that helps me remember that I do have value, but that doesn't make the shit go away inside of me.
Yes.
And I've recently, really the last month has been a really challenging time. And I work with a coach weekly.
Yeah.
I sit in meditation almost daily. And I pray. And then when the shit really hits the fan and I can't figure out what to do, I call my sponsor. And I sat in a coffee shop a week ago today because I was miserable. And I showed up and I gave him this big, long explanation of this project that I had been working on and how I had done my best and it didn't work out the way that I wanted it to. And it was really screwing with my self-worth. And he gently put his hand on my knee and he said, I'm just going to stop you right there. And he said, why do you think you need to explain yourself to me? Why do you think you need to like validate all of your work? And I kind of looked at him and I didn't have a great answer other than to say, because I want you to know that I'm right and I did the best that I could. And he turned to me and he said, it doesn't matter what you did. I love you regardless. You're deserving of love regardless of what you do. And I'm sitting in a coffee shop holding back tears because I forget.
Yeah.
I forget that I'm not broken, and I forget that I am deserving of love regardless of what I do. And he even said, he goes, I don't care if you made the biggest mistake and screw up of your entire life. It's not going to change the way that I feel about you. So being so fortunate to have somebody in my life who knows me well enough, who can say one phrase and bring me to tears, that conversation alone changed the whole course of last week and into this week.
Very, very amazing. Thank you. And just finally, when you find yourself in this space where you've talked about people and actions and even just your own path, what do you find yourself most grateful for today? Just in this moment, here and now.
Just the mention of gratitude brings up feelings. I have such an amazing spirit family and teachers and community around me today. And I didn't have that for a really, really long time. I thought I found that on bar stools. And then I thought I found that in the rooms of 12-step recovery. And I couldn't ever quite find where I really fit in.
Yeah.
So I built it. I built a community very slowly around this work of deepening consciousness. And it's not about Vedanta, it's not about Buddhism. It is just about people who want to show up and be better human beings, however they choose to.
Yeah.
I say that universal truths are spoken in many languages, and I don't care what language you're speaking, as long as you show up and you want to know yourself better and you want to do less harm. And I have such an amazing community that I never, ever had growing up that I am so incredibly grateful for.
Wow. Beautiful. Well said. Thank you. Thank you, Govind Dass. Thank you for your showing up. Thank you for
you.
your brilliance. I so appreciate our friendship, and I just, of course, wish you well. And I'm really looking forward to continued experimentation going forward on this deep work, right?
Yeah.
So here we go, and
Come
prospering.
jump in. The water's warm. The hot tub. There's space for everybody.
Beautiful. Thank you. Have a
Yeah, thank
wonderful
you.
rest of your day. Awesome.
Yeah.